Paul writes to Timothy to give him direction about how to serve the church in Ephesus. And the short passage that we've heard from that letter today is very direct and to the point. Timothy is to tell the people to pray. Pray for everybody. But Paul specifies, pray for the king and those who are the leaders of the people. This dates back to a time that immemorial really, when a people, a nation, body politic, was not only the people, but also their leaders and God, or their understanding of God, all of them together in one unity. And so we recall this time of a simpler time of cohesion, really, at least an attempt at cohesion, and see that that was very much the time also of the first century. But when we look back at what we've heard from the prophet Jeremiah, we get an even longer view, for that was written, or at least celebrates a time of about 600 years before the time of Christ, and Jerusalem is being overrun by the Babylonians, and the people of Judea, the Jewish tradition, really saw what was happening to them as God's judgment on who they were, what they had been doing. And so the prophet does ask initially, well, is the Lord not in Zion? Is her king not in her? For he then says, well, God is provoked because we have brought in foreign idols. We have not been favored. We have not been faithful to our God. And so what happened to them was throughout the Old Testament blamed on the people's conduct, their faithfulness or unfaithfulness, as it may be. And the psalmist is following in the same tradition, also probably writing at that time of the Babylonian Empire taking over Jerusalem, and says that the heathen have made Jerusalem a heap of rubble. Well, that really did happen. And so that was a critical time in the history of the Jews, and they saw it as God's judgment of their unfaithfulness, and that they needed to restore their faith, and God would bring them back together. And that was the way they understood themselves and their history. So we do that to some extent even in our own culture, although thanks to Roger Williams, we have practiced, at least attempted to practice, the separation of church and state. We still, at critical times in our history, have something of that sense of unity under God. So for instance, it was during the Civil War that we started stamping on our coinage, "In God We Trust." And it was during the Cold War, the 1950s, that again we felt very threatened and put the same slogan, "In God We Trust," on our paper currency, and added to the pledge to the flag that we are one nation under God, indivisible. That phrase, "under God," was not in the pledge until 1954. That may be a long time ago to some of you, but I remember it, you know. I had to learn that phrase and get it in there. So that's part of our own tradition that at a critical time we, like the Hebrews perhaps, have at least verbally put in that statement of unity with God. So that gives us a sense of cohesion, society, and God, and that actually underlies the parable that we've heard today, this very puzzling parable that Jesus tells, not to the crowd, not to everybody, but just to his disciples. It's important to keep that in mind. For it is an ambiguous little story, and it is told from the point of view of the manager, the overseer of a great property, who is obliged to be faithful to his employer. But no, he has not been, and has rather lined his own pockets with some of the profit of this estate and gotten caught. And so the story opens, and it's the owner of the property who's saying to his manager, "You're going to be audited and you're fired." And the manager says, "What do I do?" And then he has an idea. Well, he'll just cheat all the more. And then, but not put that money into his own pocket, but rather into the pockets of the people that he owes money to. And, or that his master owes money, the creditors. Now, the creditors are other managers. They manage somebody else's property. And so they're very delighted with this deal that they get from this shrewd manager that we're talking about, and take that 50% cut or that 20% cut in what they owe. And you would think that the owner would be distressed about this. And just when we're ready to hear his distress, we hear him say to the manager, "Well, good for you. Your shrewdness is paid off. And just what you wanted, you wanted to be made at home in the home of somebody, and so you've done a favor to people and they will take you in." And I want to say, this is a story that Jesus taught. It just, we're not used to the person who cheats to be rewarded in any way, much less to be congratulated. It's very ambiguous. And so we come to that and ask, well, what's Jesus getting at? And then we remind ourselves that irony is a very good literary device, and that's what's going on here. It's really a twist that gets our attention and makes us want to know, well, what's going on. For the writer tells us that the people of the world are more shrewd than Jesus' followers, who need some shrewdness, some savvy. For although they are not of the world, as Jesus will later say, they are in the world, and they rather need to know how to deal with it. Perhaps it's somewhat similar to the line in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says to his followers, "See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And we're left puzzled by that line too. How can you be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove? Well, it will take our whole life to figure that one out, and we may still not get it, and yet we see what he means. Life is not clear-cut. Life is not A or B, black or white. It's rather a mixture, and we sort our way through it. It's never easy. But that's what's called for, to be wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove, to be to be loving and faithful and a bit shrewd. Well, the bottom line of this argument is a classic pattern of moving from the lesser to the greater. What is true for the lesser will also be true in the greater. So if you are trustworthy in something small, you will be given something big to manage. If you are faithful in what is small, you will also be faithful in what is greater. So it's important in sorting our way through life to know our categories. What's important, what's less important. This parable is very contemporary, is it not? Following the news this past week, as I'm also dealing with the scripture, I just couldn't have imagined a week when it wasn't more in touch with one another. You know, for ambiguity, for tension, for contrast, for is it this or that? That is the time we live in, the choices that face us in this coming election, and the issues are weighty, very significant, very breathtaking. And that the story is breathtaking. So we are in this place of confusion, and we are asked, well, what do we believe? For we're in a world of truth versus lies, of belief that is often shaped by self-interest and prejudice. And we come down to recognizing that as a people, we are not as good as we thought we were, or not as good as we hope to be. It's a troubling time. And so it is in this story that we've heard. A troubling situation. And Jesus is saying to his disciples and to us, yeah, that's the way the world is. And we always need to just feel our way through it, but have our categories straight to decide, well, where is my true love, my true obedience, my true faithfulness? Get things in their proper perspective and order. For the manager has just worked for profit. First his own, and then for the people that his boss owes money, and thereby making a place for himself in the world that he is accustomed to, the world of managers. Okay, he's successful in that. But that's the world of mammon, the world of wealth, the world of limited perspective and secondary values. But Jesus is saying to his followers, but the children of light, even though they aren't very savvy, at least they've got their eye on what's important. Their faith is well placed. And the home for them is the eternal home. And that's the choice that faces everybody. To get our perspective in proper view. And to know that in this world, yeah, we do need some of the qualities of this world, but ultimately and always we need to have our faith well placed. And what will truly feed ourselves, our souls, and what will truly feed the world. For if any of us are hungry, all of us are hungry. So what will satisfy that ultimate allegiance, that ultimate faith in God? And we have prayed that today in our collect, when we have prayed to not be anxious about earthly things. And our mind goes to, the chairs and tables, the nuts and bolts, the things of this world, our bank accounts and so forth. That's mammon. But there are intangible things that are also the things of this world that are transitory and therefore fragile, and we value them deeply. And one of them would be the values of us as a people and as a government. Yes, that's not just an investment, that's an identity. And we do believe that it's consistent with the way of God. And that's what's at stake here as well. So to see those lines, to to follow our path through it all, and to place our love in things heavenly, and know that the things that earthly things are passing away, and to choose that which endures, and to know that in some ways they overlap in the values, but not in the person of God and Jesus Christ and us as Christ followers. And so we also take hope in another collect of the church, which is that we fear nothing except the loss of God, which of course is impossible. So that's who we are. That's where we stand. It's not easy, but it's worth it every step of the way. Amen.